Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started here in just a moment while people join the webinar. Thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate your time. Feel free to let us know where you're watching from in the chat, or if you have any questions come up, you can let us know in the Q&A. Okay, people are still joining. Great. Okay, well, while more people join, there's just a couple reminders. We are recording, so the on-demand webinar will be available afterwards. So in our follow-up, we'll send a link to the recording. If you have any questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A. If any comments, please use the chat. We're here to answer any questions you might have. We'll also be sharing a number of links during the webinar. So there'll be a post-webinar survey that we encourage you to fill out, especially if you're interested in certificate attendance. And there'll also be a link to some spring and summer PD offerings from NCEA that we'll make available in the chat as well. Great, so let's begin with a short prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time we have. We ask you to bless us, bless our presenters, everyone joining us, both live and those who will watch the recording. And we ask that you keep our hearts and minds open to anything that you'd like to tell us today. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. With that, it's my pleasure to pass it off to Diane. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great, thank you so much, Jonathan, for that introduction and for getting us set. As Jonathan said, welcome to everyone this afternoon. I know for some of us it may actually still be morning, so we appreciate you taking time to join us today. This is actually the second session that we had facilitated in a 3-session series that first launched at NCEA 2021, our annual conference. So for those of you that were with us earlier in April, welcome back. And for those not, we'll actually kind of catch you up to speed before we launch into everything today. So as Jonathan shared, I'm Dr. Diane Floyd. I am currently serving as a superintendent of schools for the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City. I've had the honor of serving this capacity for 5 years. Have spent 9 years here at the diocesan level, previously had served as an associate superintendent. And then prior to that, I had been in our system as a principal, Catholic school principal for 10 years, and a classroom teacher actually outside of our system for 6 years prior to that. As we all know, the superintendency has a long list of responsibilities, but some of those areas that I really cherish the opportunity to get to focus on with our school leaders is in the areas of strategic planning for our schools, as well as curricular refinement and instructional practices, and then ultimately school collaboration, working with our school leaders and their growth of their schools and making them not only more Christ-centered, but excellent places to be. Now I'm going to turn things over to my wonderful assistant today, Rachel Dowell.
Hi, it is so good to be here with you guys. I come to you from Mount St. Mary's in Oklahoma City. So we are a 9th through 12th grade school, coeducational school with approximately 400 students. I'm currently serving as our Dean of Curriculum and Instruction. But the reason that I'm part of this webinar is because I used to be an associate superintendent for the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City. So for those of you who were with Diane and the rest of the team in the first session, you got to hear all about, the why that this was created and how, intentionally things were designed. And then I'm here today to kind of tell you about like the backbone, the building blocks of this system, which really correlate pretty strongly to my professional interests, which are professional learning, helping schools collect and use data, because I learned from the Greeley Center, if you are going to take data up, you sure better do something with that data. And then, just having a positive school culture and about how all of the data that you collect can like really influence the direction that you take a school positively. So that's us.
Thanks, Rachel. So we want to be sure that you can engage actively in the session today, and that always includes having access to slides and other resources we may share. So just a bit of information, you can text NCEA 2021-data to 773-770-4377. And we've got that up here on the slide here that Rachel's sharing with you. And you'll actually receive the slide deck as well as additional materials directly to your inbox in the midst of our presentation today. That way you can be able to access things as we go through them, but then you'll also have access to them beyond this presentation as well too. We are also very happy to answer any questions that you might have today. And as Jonathan shared, just enter those within the chat feature, and we'll be monitoring that together and hopefully can respond during the presentation if it's appropriate at that time. And most definitely we have carved out time at the end where we've allowed for some Q&A for the group.
I am putting all of this information in the chat too, so that if somebody misses the slide or somebody enters in late, they can go back and see. So the different resources that you will be getting from us are a copy of this slide deck. And then the different items that we're taking you through today are a sample observation form. So you will actually gain access to one of our observation forms, a sample observation feedback template. So this is what we would give to our teachers. A sample spreadsheet that actually has teacher data in it, but we have taken away any of the identifying features so that you can't see who that information is about. And then sample aggregate data in two different reports. So basically we are going to take you through the process of collecting data and about how we start to use that data.
Thanks, Rachel. So before we really launch into the full focus of today's session, I feel like we should have the little statement that says previously on. We shared in our first session, which was titled Designing Observation Systems That Deepen Catholic Identity, an overview of what led us to this goal of redesigning our existing systems of teacher performance review in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City. In addition, during that time, we discussed what the process of design looked like for us, as well as really a high-level overview of the new performance review process, of which the goal is offering our teachers high-quality feedback and evidence over just evaluation. All of this we do by embracing our Catholic identity, which emphasizes the value of the individual person and wanting to honor the feedback that we give to teachers so that it's a process of growth for them, but then ultimately improves our student performance and achievement, which is the mission for which we're all there, and bringing that, helping them to know themselves, within that person of Jesus Christ. So this really captures our why. So if our goal was to focus on the positive, build strengths and affirm the uniqueness of all of our staff members, we knew that we needed an effective tool that was going to help us to collect this data. This would also provide a constant metric that would help us identify system-wide strengths as well as growth opportunities. It also would allow us to strategically respond to teacher development needs that would come up, and then improve, as I said, ultimately our student academic growth and achievement. So in our time together today, as Rachel previewed for you, we're really going to focus on the how, so to speak. How did we tackle this challenge and really start to operationalize our why? I'm going to invite Rachel now to begin sharing with us the tools that we developed specifically for this purpose.
So the very first thing that we're going to show you today is the sample, is a class environment. Actually, let me back up just a little bit. We adopted the Danielson framework. And when I say we adopted it, we modified it so that it has elements of Catholic identity in it, along with untangling the instruction piece and the assessment piece. So we have 5 domains that we focus on. We have classroom environment, instruction, assessment, planning and preparation, and professional responsibilities. So 4 of those domains are what the Danielson framework uses. It's just that we have taken instruction and assessment and pulled them apart so that we can really focus on those 2 things individually. So we are going to be sharing with you class environment materials. So hold on just a second while I bring up the next thing.
And just to kind of speak to, as Rachel shared, the
Mm-hmm.
domains that we focused on, we're going to share with you class environment today. But we were also, one thing that we shared in that first session as well too, is that we were very intentional about which domains we would focus on each quarter of the school year, thinking about things in a timeline for what it matters most to teachers as they're preparing for their classrooms. And so this was the first area that often many of our teachers, both those that are experienced and those that are new to teaching, tend to focus on.
So this is the classroom environment form. This is what a principal, so how we have advised principals in the Archdiocese to do this is to take a laptop into a classroom when they are observing a teacher, and to sit somewhere in the classroom that's comfortable, and to take notes and complete this form basically while they are doing the observing. So some of our principals have preferred to take paper notes and then to go back in and type things into this form. But really, for the sake of ease, it's kind of a best practice to go ahead and just input everything directly here. And after this year of COVID, some of those hangups about using technology, I think that we've gotten past them. So, it really is a best practice to just go ahead and take your laptop or an iPad in and fill this out while you're doing the observing. So we were really intentional with the different areas that we put into this form. So it was important for us to have the date observed and time observed. That way that you can make sure that you're not going into classes at the exact same time every single morning. Time observed helps you get some feedback for yourself about, am I only seeing the beginning of class periods? Am I only seeing the end of class periods? That way that you can kind of check yourself as an instructional leader. We have put the teachers into a drop-down list. So let's say that we are observing Bilbo Baggins, so that is required. We worked with a consultant named Allie Rodman, who owns the Learning Loop, and she is just absolutely phenomenal. And she helped us design all of these different elements. And when we were talking about this form and how we wanted to create it, she advised us to include teacher experience. And so we came up with either new to our school. So that could be any first year teacher. Like you're capturing several groups of people. You're capturing all first year teachers, and then you're also capturing just teachers who are new to your school. So that tells you if you have had, if there are areas that you need to focus on for your new people, or if there are areas that you need to focus on for more veteran teachers. Down the line, like once you get into this for a few years and you see that you might want some different data, maybe you want to say teacher experience at your site is like 0 through 2 years, 2 through 5 years, and 5 or more years. So, you could really do that however, you think best meets the needs of your particular school. Then grade band, as many of our schools have multiple grade level bands, we have people choose what their grade level band is. If you were wanting to implement something like this just for your school, and you were at a high school, you might do, 9th grade teacher, 10th grade, 11th or 12th, whatever you're viewing. Or you might want to keep like K through 2 if you're in an elementary, and 3 through 5, and then 6 through 8. It's kind of however you want to group your teachers. It's really about what kind of data you're hoping to get back from these observations. So we'll see in just a little bit that collecting this information, when we were looking at this on an aggregate scale for the Archdiocese, you could see some trends with how principals look at early elementary teachers versus like how they look at 11th and 12th grade teachers, and it leads to some interesting questions. Subject area observed, we feel like it's very important to get this. And then if a principal wants to, they can say what the specific courses that they observed. So the next thing, after getting this general information, we go directly into evidence collecting. So we felt it was very important to set the tone that evidence is what we are doing here. There will be a rating, so we do ask the principals to categorize their teachers with a rating, but that's not the focus. We were training principals to have conversations with their teachers that were evidence-based. And, Diane could tell you, I think you remember, Diane, that it was difficult for some of our principals to get past the narrative, and to get into evidence-based discussions about what they saw in the classroom.
Yes, and I'm happy to speak to that just briefly, Rachel. Also, if you have a chance, can you zoom in on the form just a little bit for them? I know they're going to share it with them. It might speak to your example better. As Rachel shared, we were finding that the principals we were all learning actually along with this, and that so much of what they were recording were really just kind of like a step-by-step of what they were seeing. I mean, it was truly just, observing movement, observing things that were stated. And so when they came to the point that they were actually trying to offer truly effective feedback and specific feedback to the teachers, they were finding what they didn't have that really to be able to share. And so at every moment, I think when we thought what was one step forward, we felt like maybe it was two steps back, but we learned so much from that, because then we were able to once again make that shift and refocus on what was needed most at that particular time. And so we were really able to drill down on, what should we be looking for, and what truly does serve as evidence, and realize the other helps that we needed to build in for them along the way.
Yes. So we really like that the evidence part of the conversation comes in first. And really, we're asking principals to focus their observation on, write about how the teacher cultivated, the entire child, write about how students supported each other in the classroom. So provide us with evidence about what that looks like, basically. So there was a lot of training that went into this. So you can see we have 2A, creating a respectful environment, 2B, establishing a culture for learning, 2C, building a safe space for prayer and reflection, managing classroom procedures, managing student behavior, organizing physical space. So these are directly taken from the Danielson framework, with the exception of building a safe space for prayer and reflection. So then we come down here and we ask, after the principal has provided some comments, some evidence-based comments about what they have observed, to go ahead and give one of the following essentially ratings, performance descriptor. So we steered them to try not to answer no evidence observed unless there was really no evidence observed is almost like lower than developing. It's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is it took us a while to basically define what no evidence observed means to us. So it's not just kind of like a get out of jail free card for the principal. They have to basically come up with, I guess, so some of our principals, seem like we're trying to avoid having difficult conversations with teachers by choosing no evidence observed and just being like, "Ooh, didn't see anything. Okay, can't say anything about your classroom environment because I didn't see some of these things." So internally, we just really, when we were going through the norming process, we really had to make sure that everybody was on the same page about what these performance descriptors meant. So, we asked the principals to come in and they would fill these out, but not randomly, intentionally. So not doing what I'm doing right now. And then there is a space for additional feedback. So Diane, what kind of feedback did we see from the principals?
So on the additional feedback portion, So yes, so we added that. We were, once again, was an intentional addition to our feedback form, because in addition to determining that data that we thought was most important to collect, we wanted to also allow a field for school leaders to really provide any additional feedback that they saw, kind of once again hearkening back to what we knew their practice had been previously. What it afforded, though, was a way to capture the qualitative feedback. It was really more than just the rating or the observation, which we knew they were still, they were still themselves really trying to, reconcile with, how they wanted to offer that feedback to teachers. And so, since this form in turn populates to the teacher, it really in that field gave the opportunity to be able to offer positive reinforcement, as well as anecdotal feedback to the teachers. It also helped cultivate and build that personal connection, to start to develop that personal professional relationship, to have offer quality feedback from the school leader to the teacher. In cases of concern, or opportunities for growth, because we knew those things were going to exist as well too. It really provided the school leader the ability to start to document and to track that feedback. As we said, we really wanted the focus on this to be about opportunities, to be about growth. But at the same time, I mean, we are having to engage in a process, not just of supervision, but of evaluation as well too. And so we were very much about, we're going to coach, but at some point, we want to make sure that we're documenting that if we're coaching and that there still is not expectations being met or growth taking place, then that shifts the conversation we have to start having with those individual teachers. And so this afforded the opportunity for our school leaders to be able to track that and to be able to help to create that narrative in a qualitative way, to be able to really create context around when some of those more challenging conversations were happening. Now Rachel's actually going to share with us an example of what that teacher feedback form looks like. So this is the document that actually then goes out to the teachers.
Yes. So this right here is what the teacher feedback document looks like. I'm about to toggle back over, but I just want to make sure that you all are aware that as we are showing you live some of these documents, you can also follow along in the slideshow if you want to refer back to them later. So Zoom is doing that thing where there we go. Where the top comes down and then I can't actually touch any of the things at the top. Okay, so here we are. So after a principal completes that Google form, all of that information gets uploaded into a spreadsheet. And I'm going to tell you about that in just a second. But from that spreadsheet, we are able to import all of that data automatically into a template, a document template. So it gets automatically populated, and then you could set this up so that the feedback sheet gets shared with teachers directly. But our principals really wanted to be able to see the template first and to maybe make some edits and then share it with the teachers themselves. So we'll talk about that whole process here in just a minute. But for your viewing pleasure, you can see that this template corresponds, and let me make it bigger. This corresponds with the different areas on that Google form that we just looked at. So instead of it saying test teacher, when you press submit, it would automatically come up with, who did I pick? Bilbo Baggins, I think, so the name Bilbo Baggins would be right here. The date observed, time observed, grade band, any of that information that you filled out is automatically going to populate in a document like this. Then we have the ratings would come here, the performance descriptors. So that is that no evidence observed, applying, innovating, all of those beginning, applying, and innovating. Those performance descriptors will populate right here. And then down here, I didn't delete this evidence because I wanted you to see how that populates. and about the kind of evidence that, that a teacher would get from their observer. So, this is anonymous, so you can't see what teacher received this feedback, but you can see the type of feedback that the teacher received. And so if there was additional feedback, which is what Diane was just talking about, it would populate down here. And observed by is going to automatically populate with whoever completed the form. And then in our system, after a teacher was able to, additional feedback would populate right here. And then we gave teachers the opportunity to respond to the feedback that the principals gave them. So that would be done digitally. So after the observation happens, the principal presses submit, and this document is given to the teachers. It's sent by email to the teachers. The teacher looks it over, and if they have any feedback like, oh, thank you for noticing this, or, oh, like I just felt like I was not on top of my game today, whatever your teachers want to say, they have the opportunity to enter into that conversation by completing this teacher feedback right here. Then after they complete that digitally, since this is a Google Doc, it's shared with both parties. The principal or somebody in the administration office prints this off, and then both parties sign it physically, and then it goes physically in the teacher's folder. So that is how we set things up, initially at least. I want to show you now a little bit of back end stuff. So I'm going to zoom back out. So what we are looking at right now is a spreadsheet that has data from my school, that from one of our years of observations using this particular tool. So these are classroom environment observations, and they have been made anonymous so that you can't see, who any of the people were who were observed. So you can see that on this spreadsheet, you can organize things. So I want to see who are the people who are new to the school, what similarities, like look at all of that developing that's going on there compared to all of this innovating and applying for people who had been at the school longer. So that's one of the cool things about being able to create your form and, get the kind of feedback that you would like to receive, by including specific data fields. So this is a form that has been all filled out. It has the additional feedback. So you can see that at least at our school, we weren't always consistent about giving additional feedback to every single teacher. And then you can see, no, I think I made it invisible so that you can't see the actual evidence statements. So that was smart of me. So the way that we set things up so that it was automatic is we used an add-on called Autocrat. And this is something that I'm just going to kind of briefly go over. There is a link in our presentation to Autocrat so that you could, really dig into it, because some people are going to be overwhelmed by this and some people are going to think that it is the coolest thing. So when you have a spreadsheet, you can use a tool called Autocrat. It is a Google extension, so you have to download it you have to enable it, I guess I should say, for your Google School or diocese or whatever system you're using. And you create a job. So we've already created this job, and I'm just going to walk you through it. We created a job. So the very first step is you give that job a name, MSM Class Environment Observations 1920, because that was the school, Mount St. Mary's, and that was the year. Then you choose a template from Drive. So that document that we just showed you, that's an example of the template that you would link here. So you link your templates. And then you make sure that all of the headers, all of these different components map to different places in your spreadsheet. So you have to make sure that those match, which is, you really need to watch the Autocrat video to figure out how to do that. We had it set up so that the teacher name would automatically be put into the file name. We had it output as Google Docs. We chose the folder that it would be housed in. We're just clicking through that. This is where I said that you could set things up so that it shares automatically. So after you press submit on the form, you can have a document get populated automatically and then emailed to the teacher automatically if you want to set things up like that. But our principals, again, they said, no, please let me touch it before it goes out to the teachers. This is probably the easier way to do things if you're just starting off. But some of you might like to jump in with your feet to the fire, so go for it. Run form on a trigger, press yes, because that means that every time somebody submits the form, it will automatically generate that sheet, that feedback sheet. Do not run it on the time trigger. And then you save it and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You are done and set up. So that is basically how we were able to go from using a Google form to automatically having it create these feedback sheets that we could share with teachers very easily. So again, you probably will want to watch the Autocrat YouTube video to get a better idea of how to use that. It's a much better tutorial than the 60-second one that I just gave you. But it is an incredibly helpful tool. And since Catholic schools, we're all running on pretty thin budgets for the most part, it's a good workaround to having to pay for a service.
Thanks, Rachel, so much. So I know a lot of technicalities there. So thankfully you'll be able to access all of this again to be able to review it. But then we're certainly available to answer questions specific to that as well, ongoing. So now we have all this data. What do we do with it? That's always the number one question. As Rachel mentioned, if we're going to collect it, I always say if you're going to, expect it, you just better inspect it as well too. And that means we've got to do something with it. I know one of the conversations or questions we addressed in the first session was, was there some anxiety amongst the teachers about, the fact that this was all populating in this way and that our office would have access to it. And we really tried to couch it in this conversation of, it's really not about looking at these individual teachers at this point. For us anyways, it was, what do we do now that we are very rich with data, and how can we actually make this actionable? And so we really took to our principal meetings. It's the forum that we have to work consistently and regularly with our school leaders. We meet monthly with them. And so that provided a place for us, an avenue to start to be able to have some time together to work through this, but then to have some conversations as well too. And then ultimately to model for them what we hoped they would take back into their buildings and do with their faculty and staff, either collectively as a whole with aggregated data for this school, but then also for those individual conversations as well. So our work first focused on the practice with those feedback forms and the type of data that we were actually collecting. So as we shared, there was 5 different domains that we were actually doing through this framework. We focused just on classroom environment in this session. But not all of them required a classroom observation. Some of them we would be collecting artifacts or getting a narrative, conferencing with teachers. And so we knew we were going to have to look at all the different ways we were collecting information, but focused first on these feedback forms. And since we also wanted to basically simulate that classroom observation experience with the principals, we used materials or resources such as YouTube, the teaching channel, as well as even videos of our own teachers that were willing, some were very willing to allow their principal to film them, then to seek that feedback, from our collective group of school leaders. And so what this first allowed our leaders to do was to norm these tools together. Using something new, we figured out really quickly we needed to kind of start having a common language for what we were talking about. We had provided look-fors and observer guides for them. And so we really wanted to create some context around what does quality teaching, what it should look like. And what we might recognize as a developing teacher versus what we might recognize as an applying teacher, as well as an innovating teacher. And so even in those initial times that we did some of this norming together, just in watching videos and filling out one of the feedback forms, we were really all over the map with it. To Rachel's point, sometimes principals weren't wanting to have what they thought might be a harder conversation with someone, or to admit maybe to one of our more seasoned veteran teachers that they may only be at the developing level, in a particular area, in a particular subcomponent of a domain. And so we wanted to be able to talk with each other, first of all, about how we might do that, and then to give them the confidence that they needed as they went back into their buildings with that. So then that shifted even a little bit more. As we started to have our own data, we transitioned then from norming our instruments to really reviewing and analyzing the aggregated data that we had across the Archdiocese together. And then not only were we able to look at diocesan-wide information, but we were also able to give them kind of their own snapshot for their own school level, site level information as well too. So reports like this, as we know, can be used in a lot of different ways. And so I'll have Rachel, if you want to go ahead and advance to that, to take a look at what some of these reports actually looks like. But we know that they can be used in many different ways. There's many factors that we know that can really affect how data can be interpreted. So it really wasn't good practice for our office, from the Catholic Schools Office perspective, to say, if you see X, then Y must be happening in your school. So we really wanted to engage school leaders in that conversation, and we wanted them to use the reports as a way that it really would serve as a reference point to start asking questions about teaching and evaluation practices, and to create that self-reflection that we wanted them to be able to have. And so we really did this by using the I Notice, I Wonder protocol. So while reviewing the observation data, we would ask them we engage them in this protocol. So you've got here, this shows an example of some of the data reports that were provided to principals in the first time that we tackled this together in the fall of 2019 with the classroom environment observations and the feedback from that. And so you have right here, these are snapshots from 2A, which is creating a respectful environment. And you can see where we've got information that's broken down by those grade level bands that we talked about. But then we also have just overall that teacher population with respect to the descriptors and where they happen to be rated at that particular time. And so while reviewing this data, we were very intentional with that, walking them through that protocol. So we would ask them to write I notice statements that were really simply just observations, not inferences, and based on those what they were observing in this information. And then along with that, after they had some I notice statements, we would ask them then to write or consider some I wonder statements. And that was just based on the things that they've noticed. And so just an example of that with this particular information set that you have before you is that one of the I notice statements might be that, they noticed 67% of teachers were rated as applying in this particular area when it comes to creating a respectful environment. And so that meant that more teachers were rated as applying in this category than any other, actually, except for organizing physical space. So that was something that stood out that just kind of was something that we noticed in that. And so what that led to was an I wonder statement of, I wonder why teachers are performing better in creating the respectful environment than they do in any other component, in this domain, because many of these were established around a culture for learning, for that safe space for prayer and reflection. So why was it that this one stood out as the teachers performing better in this particular area? So really walking through our school leaders using these I notice and I wonder statements allowed them to start to not only have the conversations together about what they were seeing, but then take back to their buildings, but then collectively as a whole, what we were able to do was to start talking about where are some of the needs, where do we see some deficits or opportunities for growth? What are some things that maybe we as a system could start to be able to help support them on, if there were some overall areas and opportunities for growth? Where are the areas that we were really just excelling? If we started to notice particular schools that were just really thriving in a particular domain, in a particular subcomponent of that, then we could ask that question is, what are you doing that's been successful here, and how might that be replicated in other buildings as well too? But really, more than anything, this opportunity for self-reflection, and then in turn, really started to provide them some questions that they could take back and really that were worthy of further investigation or action on their part, equally as well for us at the systems level as well too. Rachel, anything else that you'd like to contribute to the use of the data reports there?
Yeah, actually, I would like to show you all.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to toggle between the two data reports, and there is a lot to see here. So you have these with you. But basically, I created an archdiocesan report. So that had all of the aggregate data from all of the schools in the archdiocese. And then I would create a report just for the particular school site. So I just kind of wanted to briefly take you through these things. So there's a lot of writing on this front page. But as Diane said, we really look at data as an opportunity to ask questions, especially like from leadership. That is so important. When you look at data with your teachers or when you look at data with your principals, it's not really for you to say, I see this, it means this. It's an opportunity for you to ask questions and really encourage that thoughtfulness and reflection and goal setting and growth in general. So there's a whole page of questions if you're not somebody who is great at coming up with those on your own. And as Diane showed you, there are all of these pie charts that show you the data from all of the teachers in the archdiocese. So we have that for every subcomponent. And then we have it broken down by the grade level bands. So over here, you can see that our high school principals really think that like the 11th and 12th grade teachers, they see them as very innovative. And one of the questions that we asked of our principals is like, so let's look at those evidence statements and then you show me where that innovation is happening. Because in our system, innovation means that the teacher has created a completely student-centered, student-driven classroom where they are setting their own goals. They are responsible for their learning. One of those just beautiful learning environments. And so we were asking those hard questions. Is that what is actually happening? Or do you just have kids very well trained to take notes quietly and to do the things that they're supposed to do? So that was a good opportunity for us to ask some questions. So this data is very interesting. And then there's a third set of charts that we have for the archdiocesan data. So we broke it down by new teachers and then teachers who had been there for more than a year. So you can see all of those as well. Now compare that with this. Looks exactly the same, but see how it has sample school instead of archdiocese up there. So I made a report for each school that had the same kind of information. This is overall the teachers in that particular building. So like Mount St. Mary's, this would be a report just about Mount St. Mary teachers. So it has the information for all of the teachers, and then we broke it down by leader. So for component 2A, leader 1, this is how they rated people. So 64% of the people that leader 1, so that could be Rachel Dowell, 64% of the teachers, I rated them as applying. Whereas leader 2, look at that. This leader said 91% of the teachers that they saw were applying. So then you get to ask some questions internal in your school side about like, hey, is all of our leadership team on the same page about this? Or do we need to do some internal norming so that we can have an idea, the same idea about what it means to have no evidence, to be developing, to be applying, and to be innovating. So there's just a lot of room to ask good questions based on this data, which I love.
Thanks so much, Rachel. So I'm trying to look, in fact, I'm responding right now in our chat feature for any questions that we may have. One that just came up, Rachel, is about Autocrat. So I think what they're asking, what Katie's asking is, were these charts created, did Autocrat also, was it part of creating these?
So the charts I actually created in Google. So you can, when you have a spreadsheet, let's see if we can just quickly kind of walk you through what that looks like. So if you have a data set in Google, you can highlight that data set and make a chart for it. So do you see how I highlighted this comment or column? I'm going to come over here to insert, and then I'm going to insert a chart, and it does it automatically for you. So I would just copy these and move them over into the report. So it's not like I was having to do a bunch of this stuff on my own.
She is quite the Google wizard, though. Don't let her sell herself short. Any other questions that we've had? A few have asked again about accessing slides, and so I put back into the chat feature as well, just to text the NCEA 2021-data and the phone number that you text that to, and it'll should get all of the slide deck to you and the resources. If for some reason that it does not send to you or have difficulty with that, you are welcome to reach out to Rachel and I directly. I don't know that in fact, I'll put my email address in there as well too. So that way we can send things to you if for some reason you do not receive anything. But we'll give just another minute for any other questions that might be out there. I know this is a lot of information as far as the technical aspect of all this, but it's something that give yourself the grace to know that this doesn't happen over just 1 year. And we are in year 3 of this process. And so, and have learned so much just along the way and are certainly willing to help be cheerleaders and supporters of that as well too. But Ali Rodman with the Learning Loop also, who worked with us on this effort, we'll talk about our next session here in just a minute. Great thought partner to work with respect to developing this so that it's something that actually meets the needs of your system or your school.
I will say I got a direct question about, is there a certain threshold that Autocrat starts to kind of like encounter issues? And we do encounter issues with Autocrat. So sometimes you have to go back into a spreadsheet and, basically like you have to click run sometimes so that it runs things for you. But the good thing about Autocrat is that it always sends you an error message if it's trying to run something and it can't. So it's pretty manageable. Just so that you guys can see the scale of this, we had this set up for 22 schools. Like I set this up for 22 schools and for 5 different domains. Really only 3 of them were active at the time. And 550 teachers within those schools. And this was just like one sliver of my job, and it was still doable. But then again, like I am technologically savvy enough to like know how to do this stuff. But I think after the last year, most of us are at this point. So it really is a doable system. But there are some pay for systems that you can get the same kind of control of your data and the same kind of feedback about your data as this system does. You just have to pay for them.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Well, having seen no other questions, I'm actually in the chat myself. I just want to preview for us our last session. As I said, this is actually session 2 in a series of 3 that we were able to provide for NCEA, and we've been really honored for this opportunity. Our last one actually is scheduled for May 5th, same time. So on that Wednesday will be the topic of that one is kind of the culmination of all this, really, what it's brought us to, and that's using observation and benchmark data to identify professional learning opportunities that strengthen our Catholic schools. And so what we'll do in that session is we'll talk about the observation and student achievement data that we've collected through all of this, and how do we take that now and really craft professional learning opportunities that are going to increase not only our leadership capacity for our principals, but really drive that instructional improvement, and ultimately like we said earlier, bring our students closer to that, to that good news that we know that we spread to them, and helping them to be strong within themselves as well too. We will explore the observation norming practices that we went through, the leadership coaching approaches that we've taken through that have built our leaders' capacity, and really have provided our teachers with meaningful and action-oriented feedback. This year has been a little unique for us in the fact that we've had to pause some of these things in an effort to try to remove some barriers for our principals and the work that they've had to do just with keeping school open for this year. But we can definitely, we want to share with you our hopes and dreams that we have as we advance this forward, and look forward to sharing that with you as well too. Thanks again for your time. I know that all of our days are so, our attention can get divided so much. So we appreciate you making time to be with us today, and know that this has been recorded and will be shared out with those that registered but maybe weren't able to participate. Rachel, any parting words that you'd like to share as well too?
No, just thank you all for attending, and feel free to reach out via email or on Twitter and make those connections, and feel free to steal ideas.
Jonathan, any last minute details that you
Great.
have for them?
Thank you both so much for your time today. Really appreciate you sharing all these resources. Like Diane mentioned, this is being recorded. Feel free to share the on-demand webinar with friends and colleagues if you found it helpful. So thanks so much for your feedback there. There's a couple links in the chat, so we invite you to check out, and you'll be directed to the webinar survey at the end, especially if you're interested in a certificate of attendance. And feel free to check out some spring and summer PD offerings at nca.org, and you'll see a link for that in the chat as well. So thanks everyone for your time. Have a blessed rest of your day, and hope to see you next time.
Great. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.